start, I couldn't possibly start without thanking Brandon for the invitation and for having put together the conference. On a topic which is extremely dear to my heart. And I think I could start with a remark about culture by suggesting that with this Twitter question forum, we might have a hint of entering in a new academic culture. Another use of the word culture as the use you've made when you've evoked snow. I hope you will bear with my accent, which has layers of accents coming from everywhere in the world. So it's no longer even French accents, it has all kinds of flavors. I hope it can still be comprehensible. We shall see. Well, today I have chosen to approach the topic of mathematical cultures, and the S is extremely important for me, from the viewpoint of text, and from the viewpoint of these peculiar textual phenomena that signal adherence to a given mathematical culture. And I would like to make a footnote right here to emphasize the fact that every time I shall be using the word culture, I will mean mathematical culture. This is what I focus on, and there are other wider uses of the word culture that I'm not touching here. So there are, I suggest, some textual reflections of the fact that the practitioner is operating within a given mathematical culture. There are some textual phenomena that echo the fact that this practitioner is doing mathematics in a particular way. I'm not going to develop what I mean by doing mathematics in a particular way. One can take into account the things with which one works, one can take into account the values that are prized by the practitioners, one can take into account many things. We could think collectively of what are the components that are important to try to characterize a given way of doing mathematics. What I would like to focus on today is the cultural phenomena that relate to ways of structuring texts. And I'm going to deal with this question by reference to ancient mathematical sources, but I believe that this question of how practitioners structure their text is an issue of much wider relevance, much wider importance. Let me start with an example, and that's an example we probably all know, which is the example of Euclid's Elements or any other similar Greek text. I have not said all Greek texts, but a bunch of Greek geometrical texts. You all know that the positions in Euclid's Elements and coordinate geometrical Greek texts have a specific structure. A structure that was described in the 5th century by Proclus. Among propositions you have either problems or theorem, and each of these things has a statement followed by an exposition, followed by a determination, followed by a construction, followed by the proof, followed by the conclusion. These are the parts that Proclus set forth to describe the structure of an Euclidean proposition. So writing a book in the context of mathematical cultures, in which the elements were recognized as an essential text, implied to compose an architecture of propositions having each a specific set of parts. I think that most modern historians recognize the structure of the text of such a proposition right away, and yet they tend to overlook it, as if it was a matter of mere form and did not affect, in fact, the content, which we believe is statements, demonstrations. However, when we overlook the fact that a proposition in Euclid's Elements has parts, first of all, we may be overlooking signs that indicate a given culture, a given way of doing mathematics. But we may also create for ourselves problems in interpreting the text. In fact, and here in this comment I'm relying on a PhD thesis written by Felix John, who is about to defend his PhD thesis in Paris. In fact, it is essential to interpret Greek mathematical texts of antiquity to bear in mind, as practitioners in ancient Greece did, to bear in mind this structure of the proposition. It's essential to interpret their text and thereby interpret their practice. So, my claim, and this is what I offer for interdisciplinary discussion, my claim is that mathematical texts are structured in a specific way that is meaningful for practitioners, that signals the fact that these texts are composed within mathematical cultures in the context of which these practitioners operate, and that these parts in which mathematical texts are structured are essential to take into account to interpret the text composed in these contexts. So this is a very general thesis. And I would like to illustrate the validity of this thesis. We are going to discuss its wider validity, but I would like to illustrate the validity of this thesis by another example that I'm going to take in ancient China. And that example is going to be that of the meaning of chapters in a given mathematical cultures or in a set of mathematical cultures in the context of which the Chinese book, The 9 Chapters on Mathematical Procedures, this is the title on the first line of this slide, was compiled, or in the mathematical cultures in which this book was recognized as a key reference book. So, a few words about this book. It was perceived as a classic soon after its compilation, and in correlation with the fact that it was perceived as a classic, commentaries were composed on it. And I will need to use today the commentary that was written down, completed by Liu Hui in 263, and the sub-commentary completed in 656, so sub-commentary meaning a commentary on the 9 chapters, this is how I'm going to abbreviate the title in what follows, and on Liu Hui's commentary, by Lichtenstein and other people. So the 9 chapters is composed merely of problems, mathematical problems, and algorithms solved. As the title makes clear right away, it has chapters. And these are the chapters for which I'm going to suggest that they have a mathematical meaning. So the idea is that chapters, in this case, are not mere physical division of a book for the sake of ease, but the idea is that the chapters have meaning that adheres to a given way of doing mathematics. Beware that I have not said that every practitioner in doing mathematics in ancient China was engaged in the kind of practice that I'm going to describe, but I would like to put myself within the context of the cultures in China, the mathematical cultures that value this book, and I would like to discuss what people operating within this context read in chapters. And naturally, what I have in mind is to make the point that reading the meaning of the chapters is essential to account for the mathematics that is presented in the book. So let us start by reading a few words of the preface that Liu composed for his commentary on the 9 chapters. He writes, "It is only when the Duke of Zhou established rights, we are here." This is here a reference to 11th century before the Common Era of China. So it is only, Liu writes, when the Duke of Zhou established the rights that we know that, and here there is something that I temporarily translate as 9 parts of mathematics, but as you see I have put lots of red question marks because I'm going to revise very soon this translation. So it is only when the Duke of Zhou established the rights that we know that the 9 parts of mathematics, the 9, I'm going to call this thing shu. And there are other shu in the context of mathematics in ancient China, but today, if I say shu, I'm referring to these things that existed at the time of the Duke of Zhou, according to Liu. So we know that these 9 shu existed. The development of these 9 shu, this is precisely what the 9 chapters is. And then he's going to tell a story of the book being lost because of book burning that occurred with the unification of the Chinese Empire and how the book was recovered, but I'm going to skip this. What is important for me is what is this 9 shu, the development of which led to the 9 chapters. Note that for Liu, that means that the 9 shu and the 9 chapters existed before China was unified, and it existed in higher antiquity. And note that there are 9 things that we need to interpret an organization of mathematical knowledge, and they are connected in this statement with chapters that are book parts. So my questions are, what does shu mean here? What does development mean, which connects shu and chapters? And I'm going to focus on chapter as a key to the understanding of these notions. Second remark, it's interesting that recently many manuscripts were found, most of the time in tombs, manuscripts from the last centuries before the Common Era, so that means manuscripts from the beginning of the Chinese Empire, and that none of these manuscripts that we can read so far has chapters. So the 9 chapters is distinguished by the fact that it has chapters. And remember that the title emphasizes the fact that the book has chapters. So how to interpret this difference in book parts, this difference between the manuscripts we have and this book that was conceived as a classic. In the first part, I would like to concentrate on the titles of the chapter, and I would like to show you what we can recover a title meant. In a second part, I would like to establish the fact that the reference to chapters in the title of the book, the reference to chapters, does correspond to an organization of the book in parts, because you know that ancient books were handed down, and one of the things that was mostly changed was precisely book parts. So we need to establish that book parts, as we see them, as well as titles, are things of the past and not things of later editors. And in the third part, I will turn to a hypothesis about the meaning of a chapter, or to the question of why there are chapters in the 9 chapters. So let me begin by mentioning the first occurrence of the 9 shu in relation to mathematics. The first occurrence of this expression 9 shu is to be found in a book called The Rights of Zhou Dynasty. So we had, it is only when the Duke of Zhou established the right that we know that there were 9 shu. In fact, in the book entitled The Right of the Zhou Dynasty, that is supposed to explain the organization of a governmental institution at the time of the Zhou, we have the occurrence, among the things that the children of high classes must learn, we have the occurrence of these 9 shu. And a commentator of the 1st century of the Common Era, quoted by a later commentator, I'm going to use his name, Zhang Xuan, regularly, so please remember the name Zhang Xuan. The commentator expands what these 9 shu mean and gives the following list: rectangular field, unhorsed grain, parts weighed according to ranks, and so on. And let me emphasize measures in squares, excess and deficit, Pangyao. It's impossible so far to interpret this expression. We simply know that clearly it related to something related to the right angle triangle. And the commentator Zhang Xuan, quoting somebody from the 1st century of the Common Era, adds, in modern times there are reiterated difference, something which we do not at all understand, and third, new thing which appeared in history in modern times, base and height. So why is it important to mention this commentary by Zhang Xuan about what the 9 shu are? It is because if you look at the titles of the chapter, of the 9 chapter, which I put on the left-hand side, and I put in grey on the right-hand side where I just read, you notice that there is a very close relationship. Rectangular field, unhorsed grain, part weighted according to the rank, blah blah blah. You notice that there was 2 chapters were swapped. You notice that this Pangyao was replaced by base and height. And these are basically the differences between this list of this list of 9 shu and the titles of the chapter of the 9 chapter. Yes?
Which one's earlier?
This list is the list of the titles of the 9 chapter. We believe the book was completed in the 1st century of the Common Era. And this list first lists a list of things that are supposed to be early Shu, and gives us, in modern times being 1st century. You will see that I have elements that are going to reply to this question. So, we need to have a clarification of the similarity that I just brought to light, similarity between these 9 shu and the title of the 9 chapters. We need to clarify what that similarity means, and this clarification will come from answering the question which is my first question: what does the title of the chapter mean? So here you have the first page of chapter 3, and I translated completely the first page, or more or less completely the first page, on the right-hand side, and I'm going to show you how things correspond in the Chinese page. So here you have the name of the 9 chapters. I don't comment on the slight change of the name, we are not here for that. Book 3. You have the name of the commentator Liu Hui, the name of the commentator Li Chunfang, and in fact we are in an edition of the beginning of 13th century, and in this edition all commentaries were brought together with the text of the classic, and the 3 layers of text were handed down together. So we have here upper in the margin the name of the chapter, the title of the chapter. Here we have parts weight in function of the degree. A commentary by Liu Hui explaining what is dealt with, what this chapter allows you to deal with. And then you have, and it's very clear that these are the same 2 characters. I think you need not know Chinese to notice that these are the 2 same characters. This is the name of the operation that the first procedure is going to execute. So you have the name of the operation alone in a column. This is a commentary by Liu Hui giving an alternative name for this operation. And in the next column you have a procedure, and you see in larger characters you have the text of the classic. In smaller characters and in 2 columns you have the text of Liu Hui's commentary, unless you have a mention indicating that it is Li Chunfang commentary, and it will be also written in 2 columns and in smaller characters. Note that not all the procedures have a name attached to them. But here we have a name attached to the procedure, and the name attached to the procedure is exactly the thing which was used to make the title of the chapter. This procedure, as is very clear, is given outside any problem. You begin the chapter by a general procedure. There is a question which is open: when do algorithms relate to a name for an operation they execute, and when not? I am not going to address this question here. What I would like to show you is how the names of these operations are used. We see here, I will put blue on it, commentators using the name of operations to comment on the procedure. Here we have a proof that this procedure is correct, and to prove that this procedure is correct, the commentator is going to use operations procedures that had been introduced previously. So these names reoccur in the commentaries. Some of these names are names of procedures like this one that begin a chapter. Other names are names of procedure that are in the middle of a chapter. And this procedure in chapter 3, this procedure that begins the chapter is followed by a set of problems that have the following format. You have the beginning of a problem. Suppose we have blah blah blah, a question, the answer to this problem, and a procedure. And in the commentary on the procedure that solves this problem, again, commentators are going to use the names of some procedures, and from time to time they are going to use the name of the procedure I have just shown, namely the name of the procedure parts way according to the degree. What I would like to establish now is that the title of the chapter is the name of the first operation of the chapter and not an incipit. You know that it's a very common phenomenon that titles be given as the first characters of a part of text. So what I need to establish is that the title is not simply taking up the first two characters to make the title. So what I want to establish is that the name of the chapter is the name of the operation which is placed at the beginning of the chapter and not the first two characters of the chapter. So for this, I need to do a little bit of philology. I'm sorry, but I'm going to do it very quickly, but this is important for the argument to be rigorous. I show you here the first page, and I'm sorry it's made out of 2 copies for technical reasons that are absolutely boring, so I'm not going to explain them. So you have here page 1 of chapter 1, and if you want, page 2. You have rectangular field here, and immediately after the title of the chapter, rectangular field, the first problem, its answer, the second problem, and you see here that you have something that was damaged. You see here that the beginning of the answer was erased, and you have the white column which indicates that there used to be 2 characters here, and they no longer are here. I can prove, without entering into the reasoning, that these 2 characters were the same as these 2 characters. One way of proving it is to go to another line of documents thanks to which we know the 9 chapters. These documents rely on the 15th century encyclopedia. We are here in the end of 18th century encyclopedia that restores the 9 chapters on the basis of a 15th century encyclopedia. The 13th century document did not exist at that time, and here we have the first 2 characters that are the same as the title of the chapter, even though the layout has been changed. Layouts are things that change when documents are handed out. First chapter, I have told you, this is the 9th chapter, and again, with the same, we are in the same edition. We have the title of the chapter, base and height, 3 problems, and again, we have the 2 characters that are the name of the operation that is described at the beginning of the chapter, base and height. It's the name in Chinese for the Pythagorean procedure. We have here a commentary on this name, base and height. I will go back to this commentary in a moment. And then the procedure that solves this problem. So we can see on the basis of these two chapters that the title is the name of the operation that is put at the beginning of the chapter. I'm not going to bother you with the detail of this page. This is the opening page of chapter 8, which does not exist in the 13th century edition. It was not preserved, so I'll show you the 18th century edition. The title again is missing. I don't enter into the detail because we are not in philology. But what I want to show you here is that the second problem of the 9th chapter uses the name of the operation measures in square. And so we can prove by a philological argument that I'm not going to develop that again in this case we have the name of the chapter, which is the name of the first procedure, and that the name of this operation is used in the 9th chapter itself. Now, the first conclusion I want to draw is that the titles of the chapters are in fact the names attached to the first procedure in each chapter. In some cases we have the first procedure outside the context of any problem, so these are the first two characters that occur. In some cases we have problems and they are not the first two characters. So we can establish that we do not have an incipit, but we have the title of chapters that do takes up the name of the first operation. So the next question is, why are the names systematically the same? What is conveyed by this organization of the text? What is the meaning of this dispositif? And it will be essential to understand what I am after, namely, what is the relationship between the 9 shu, we have not yet found what this shu means, and the 9 chapters, and how can I interpret the development that leads from one to the other. I'm going, in what follows, to do a second boring thing before I reach the crux of the matter. The second boring thing is to establish the fact that the chapters are not the facts